In a quiet suburban neighborhood on a crisp autumn morning, what started as a routine traffic stop would soon expose deep-rooted assumptions and challenge perspectives on both sides of the badge. The dash cam footage tells a story that has captured the attention of millions, a story that reminds us how split-second judgments can lead to life-changing moments. A silver BMW cruises down Maple Street, perfectly maintaining the speed limit. Behind the wheel sits a distinguished gentleman in his mid-40s, wearing a crisp white shirt and tie. His 23 years of law enforcement experience had taught him to always follow traffic rules to the letter. Yet the flashing lights in his rearview mirror that morning would test everything he believed about the system he'd dedicated his life to protect. The patrol officer, relatively new to the force, had radioed in about a suspicious vehicle matching a recent alert. What he didn't know was that his suspect had supervised hundreds of similar stops during his career as a police captain. As the body cam footage shows, the young officer approached the vehicle with his hand instinctively resting on his holster, a detail that wouldn't go unnoticed by his unexpected colleague. "License and registration," the officer demanded, his tone carrying an edge that would later become a focal point of departmental discussions. The captain, drawing from years of experience in diffusing tense situations, remained calm. He knew these next few moments would either escalate into headlines for all the wrong reasons or become a powerful teaching moment for everyone involved. What happened next would send ripples through police departments across the country. As the captain reached for his credentials, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The patrol officer's body language, his assumptions, and his entire approach would soon be put under a microscope, not just by social media, but by police academies nationwide as a case study in procedural reform. The interaction would last exactly 7 minutes and 38 seconds, but its impact would stretch far beyond that morning. It would spark conversations in break rooms, training sessions, and community meetings. How could two officers, bound by the same oath to protect and serve, end up on opposite sides of such a profound misunderstanding? This wasn't just another viral video of police interaction gone wrong. This was an opportunity, a rare moment when the stars aligned to expose the complicated dynamics of law enforcement from both perspectives. The captain's unique position as both the subject of profiling and a veteran officer would bring a nuanced understanding to a conversation that too often descends into simple narratives. The dash cam continued recording as both men stood between their vehicles, unaware that their conversation would soon be viewed by millions. What started as a tense confrontation was about to transform into something neither officer expected. The captain's next words would change not only the course of that morning, but potentially the trajectory of both their careers. But perhaps the most surprising element of this story isn't what happened during those 7 minutes. It's what occurred in the weeks and months that followed. As the footage made its way through official channels and eventually to social media, it sparked a movement within the department that nobody saw coming. The events of that morning would force everyone involved to confront uncomfortable truths about bias, authority, and the complex relationship between law enforcement and the communities they serve. It would raise questions about training, accountability, and the human element that no policy manual could fully address. As we examine the footage and hear from both officers involved, we'll uncover a story that goes far deeper than a simple case of mistaken identity. We'll see how this 7-minute interaction became a catalyst for change, challenging assumptions on all sides. But first, let's rewind to that crucial moment when two worlds collided and watch as an ordinary traffic stop transformed into an extraordinary lesson in humanity. Stay with us as we unpack this remarkable story, one that reminds us how moments of conflict can sometimes lead to unexpected breakthroughs in understanding and reform. The morning's crisp air carried whispers of autumn as Police Captain David Thompson adjusted his rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the patrol car's flashing lights. 23 years on the force had taught him to remain composed in tense situations, but something felt different about this stop. As he pulled over, his mind raced through department protocols, the same ones he'd helped develop and teach to countless officers over the years. Officer Michael Richards, 2 years into his career, approached the BMW with the confidence of someone who believed they were doing their job by the book. The dispatch call about a suspicious vehicle in the area had put him on high alert. From his perspective, the silver BMW matched the general description, though the details were admittedly vague, a fact that would later become a crucial point of discussion in precinct meetings. The body camera footage reveals the subtle shifts in Officer Richards' demeanor as he approached the vehicle. His hand, initially resting on his holster, betrayed a nervousness that experienced officers learned to mask. The morning sun caught the captain's police academy rein as he carefully placed both hands on the steering wheel, a gesture of compliance he'd advised countless civilians to make during traffic stops. "Sir, I need to see your license and registration," Officer Richards commanded, his voice carrying that distinct authority that fresh officers often adopt to mask their uncertainty. The dash cam picked up the captain's measured breathing, a technique he practiced during countless high-stress situations. He knew the next few moments would require the perfect balance of assertion and restraint. As Captain Thompson reached for his credentials, the tension in the air was palpable. His movements were deliberate, practiced, the kind of careful choreography that sadly had become necessary in such situations. "Officer," he began, his voice steady and professional, "I want you to know that I'm reaching for my wallet, which contains both my driver's license and my police captain's badge." The words hung in the air for a moment, creating a silence that would later be analyzed in diversity training sessions across the country. Officer Richards' body camera captured his subtle step backward, a momentary break in his authoritative stance. The morning traffic continued to flow past them, drivers slowing down to glimpse what they assumed was just another routine traffic stop. But this was far from routine. As Captain Thompson held up his credentials, the morning sun caught the gold badge that had been pinned to his belt, previously hidden from view. Officer Richards' expression shifted from authority to recognition, then to something more complex, a mix of embarrassment and dawning realization that would become a powerful teaching moment in police academies nationwide. The conversation that followed would later be transcribed and studied in detail. Both officers, now standing between their vehicles, began an exchange that would challenge assumptions on both sides of the thin blue line. Captain Thompson, drawing from his years of experience and training, saw an opportunity not for confrontation, but for connection. "Let's talk about what brought us here this morning," the captain suggested, his tone shifting from subject to mentor. The dash cam continued recording as both men stood in the morning light, their discussion touching on topics that would soon resonate with millions: implicit bias, procedural justice, and the complex dynamics of power and perception in law enforcement. What happened next would become the focal point of countless discussions about police reform and community relations. Officer Richards, still processing the situation, made a decision that would impact not only his career, but the entire department's approach to traffic stops. The body camera captured every word, every gesture, as the younger officer began to share his perspective on the morning's events. But before either man could fully process the magnitude of their interaction, a call came through on both their radios, a reminder that they were still officers on duty, sworn to protect and serve. The situation they were about to face would test not only their professional capabilities, but also the understanding they'd just begun to develop. As both officers returned to their vehicles, the weight of their unfinished conversation hung in the air. The dash cam caught their final exchange, a look between colleagues that spoke volumes about the work that still needed to be done. Little did they know, their interaction was about to spark a movement that would reach far beyond their precinct's walls. The radio call that interrupted their conversation would prove to be more than just coincidence. It was a moment that would test everything both officers had just discussed. A reported disturbance at a nearby community center required immediate response, and both officers found themselves heading to the same location. Captain Thompson, following protocol, radioed that he would provide backup to Officer Richards. As they pulled into the community center's parking lot, the morning sun now high in the sky, they could see a crowd gathering near the entrance. The situation before them was tense. A heated argument between community members and event organizers threatened to escalate. The dash cam footage shows both officers exiting their vehicles, approaching the scene from different angles, but this time with a new awareness of each other's presence. Officer Richards, still processing his earlier encounter, watched as Captain Thompson took the lead. The body camera captured what happened next. a masterclass in de-escalation that would later be studied in police academies across the country. The captain's approach, firm but empathetic, demonstrated exactly what he'd been trying to convey during their traffic stop conversation. The crowd's energy shifted as they noticed the dynamic between the two officers. Here was the same captain who had been pulled over just minutes ago, now working seamlessly with the officer who had stopped him. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present, and the whispers began to spread through the onlookers. Someone in the crowd had recognized Captain Thompson from community outreach programs, and the story of his traffic stop was already circulating through social media. The tension at the community center was building to a crescendo. A young man in the crowd, frustrated with the situation, stepped forward aggressively. Officer Richards instinctively moved to respond, his hand moving toward his belt, exactly the kind of reaction that had characterized his earlier traffic stop. But this time, something was different. The body camera caught his hesitation, a split-second pause as he remembered his recent interaction with the captain. Captain Thompson noticed the subtle shift in Officer Richards' response. Without missing a beat, he adjusted his position, demonstrating a different approach to handling the escalating situation. The young man in the crowd, initially confrontational, found himself face-to-face with two officers who seemed to be operating with an unusual level of synchronization and understanding. The next few moments would become the centerpiece of police training videos nationwide. As the situation teetered on the edge of chaos, both officers had to make split-second decisions that would either validate or negate everything they just learned from their traffic stop encounter. The crowd's phones were recording, social media was already buzzing with the morning's events, and the pressure was mounting. Officer Richards found himself in a crucial moment of choice. The same instincts that had led him to profile the captain's vehicle earlier were now screaming for a traditional show of force. But as he looked at the captain, their earlier conversation echoing in his mind, he realized this was more than just another call. It was a chance to put their discussion into practice. The body cameras continued rolling as the situation reached its boiling point. The young man from the crowd, now just feet away from both officers, was about to make a move that would force everyone present to confront their own biases and assumptions. Captain Thompson, reading the tension in the air, knew that what happened next would either vindicate or destroy the lessons of that morning's traffic stop. The crowd fell silent, phones still recording, as all eyes focused on the three men at the center of this unfolding drama. The next few seconds would determine whether this would become another viral video of conflict or something entirely different. A moment of transformation that could reshape how law enforcement and community interactions are viewed across the country. Time seemed to slow down as Officer Richards made his decision. The body camera captured every detail of what happened next, a sequence of events that would soon be viewed and reviewed by millions. But no one present could have predicted how this situation would resolve, or how it would connect back to the traffic stop that had started it all just hours before. In a twist that no one saw coming, the young man at the center of the confrontation spoke words that sent shockwaves through the crowd. "You're that captain from this morning's traffic stop. My uncle works dispatch and told me what happened." The revelation rippled through the onlookers. Phones raised higher as people realized they were witnessing the continuation of a story that had already begun trending on social media. Officer Richards felt all eyes shift between him and the captain. His body camera captured the subtle change in his stance as he realized this situation had just become more complex than any training scenario had prepared him for. The morning's traffic stop wasn't just a private incident anymore. It had become public knowledge, adding another layer of pressure to an already volatile situation. Captain Thompson maintained his composed demeanor, but his mind was racing. The body camera footage shows him taking a calculated step forward, positioning himself where both the crowd and Officer Richards could clearly see his next moves. This wasn't just about resolving the current conflict anymore. It had become a live demonstration of everything they discussed during their traffic stop. Then came the second surprise. From the back of the crowd emerged the community center's director, who happened to be a retired police sergeant who had trained Captain Thompson decades ago. The layers of connection and history suddenly added new depth to an already complex situation. The cameras captured the recognition in both officers' eyes as they realized this moment had become about much more than just crowd control. The young man, now aware of the broader context, began sharing details of the morning's traffic stop with the crowd, some of which hadn't even made it to social media yet. Officer Richards felt his face flush as his actions were narrated to the very community he was supposed to be protecting. The body camera caught his uncomfortable shift and posture, but what he did next would surprise everyone present. Instead of retreating or becoming defensive, Officer Richards made a decision that would later be discussed in police departments across the country. With cameras rolling and the crowd watching, he chose to address the elephant in the room head-on. His voice, caught clearly on the body camera, carried a sincerity that cut through the tension in the air. But before he could finish his statement, a police scanner broadcast cut through the moment. Reports of similar tensions erupting at community centers across the city started pouring in. What had seemed like an isolated incident was apparently part of a larger pattern unfolding across their jurisdiction. Captain Thompson's expression shifted as he realized their current situation might be connected to something bigger. The retired sergeant, reading the situation with years of experience, stepped closer to the officers. He had recognized something in the pattern of events that added yet another layer to the morning's unfolding drama. The body cameras captured his whispered observation to Captain Thompson, information that caused both officers to exchange knowing looks. The crowd, still recording every moment, noticed the subtle change in the officer's demeanor. The young man who had been the focus of their attention moments ago also picked up on the shift. His next words, captured by dozens of phones and both body cameras, would force everyone to reevaluate their assumptions about the entire situation. As tension built again, Officer Richards found himself in an unprecedented position. The morning's traffic stop, the current confrontation, and now this new city-wide development. Everything seemed connected in ways none of them had anticipated. His next decision would need to balance his fresh insights from the traffic stop with the rapidly evolving situation around them. Captain Thompson, reading the uncertainty in his younger colleague's body language, knew they were standing at a crucial crossroads. The next few moments would either bridge the gap between law enforcement and community or widen it further. The body cameras continued recording as both officers prepared to face whatever came next, knowing that their response would be scrutinized by not just their immediate audience, but by the thousands already following the story online. The retired sergeant's presence added an unexpected dimension to their dilemma. His next words, spoken just loud enough for the body cameras to pick up, suggested that the morning's events, from the traffic stop to the current situation, might not be as random as they initially appeared. The revelation hung in the air as both officers processed its implications, knowing their next moves would need to account for this new information. The retired sergeant's revelation cut through the tension like a thunderbolt. The simultaneous community center disturbances across the city were part of a planned initiative, but not the kind anyone expected. They were organized by a coalition of police reform advocates and progressive officers who wanted to create scenarios that would test and document real-world police responses. What no one had anticipated was that the morning's traffic stop between Captain Thompson and Officer Richards would accidentally become part of their social experiment. Officer Richards' body camera captured the moment of realization crossing his face. The traffic stop that had left him feeling embarrassed and uncertain had actually set the stage for something unprecedented. The young man who had been confrontational moments ago stepped forward again, but this time he reached into his pocket and pulled out an official observer's badge. He was part of the initiative's documentation team. Captain Thompson's years of experience couldn't have prepared him for this moment. The body cameras recorded his quick glance at Officer Richards, a look that carried the weight of their morning's interaction. The crowd, still recording everything, fell silent as the captain made a decision that would reshape department policies across the country. Instead of maintaining the authoritative distance typical in such situations, he chose transparency. What started as a mistake this morning, Captain Thompson addressed the crowd, his voice steady and clear on the recordings, has become an opportunity for real change. He turned to Officer Richards, giving him the space to make his own choice about how to handle this revelation. The younger officer's response would become one of the most shared clips in police training seminars nationwide. Officer Richards stepped forward, removed his cap, and did something unprecedented. He addressed his morning's actions directly to the crowd, acknowledging his initial biases and sharing how the traffic stop had changed his perspective. The body camera captured the genuine emotion in his voice as he spoke about learning from mistakes and the importance of being willing to grow. But the story wasn't over. As the crowd began to respond positively to this display of humanity, emergency alerts buzzed through both officers' phones. The other community centers were reporting unexpected developments. Their planned scenarios were being overshadowed by real emergencies requiring immediate response. The test had accidentally become a real crisis. Without hesitation, Captain Thompson and Officer Richards moved into action, their morning's lesson transforming into practical application. The body cameras recorded their seamless cooperation as they coordinated with the crowd, turning potential adversaries into allies. The young observer with the badge stepped up to help, creating a bridge between the officers and the community. The retired sergeant watched with pride as his former trainee and the young officer demonstrated what real community policing could look like. Their response to the emerging crisis showed how the morning's traffic stop had catalyzed a genuine transformation in approach and attitude. The cameras captured everything: the teamwork, the communication, the trust being built in real time. As the situation stabilized, a final surprise emerged. The police reform advocates revealed that their initiative had captured far more than they'd planned. The accidental convergence of their test scenarios with the genuine traffic stop had created a powerful narrative about the possibility of real change in law enforcement. The footage from both incidents would become cornerstone material for a new training program. In the end, what started as a biased traffic stop transformed into a watershed moment for the department. Officer Richards and Captain Thompson's handling of the subsequent events demonstrated how acknowledging mistakes and being willing to learn could create positive change. Their story, captured from multiple angles and perspectives, would go on to influence police training and community relations across the nation. The body cameras recorded one final exchange between the two officers as the crowd dispersed. Their conversation, picked up clearly in the footage, showed two men forever changed by a morning that started with prejudice but ended with understanding. As they returned to their patrol cars, both knew that their story would impact law enforcement for years to come, proving that sometimes the most powerful changes start with a simple traffic stop and the willingness to learn from our mistakes. In the weeks that followed, the impact of that remarkable morning rippled through law enforcement communities nationwide. The body camera footage from both the traffic stop and the community center incident went viral, but not for the reasons anyone might have initially expected. Instead of fueling division, the videos became a powerful testament to the possibility of genuine change within law enforcement. Officer Richards, speaking at a department briefing a month later, shared how that morning had transformed his approach to policing. His words, captured during a candid interview, resonated with officers across the country. "I thought I knew what good policing looked like, but that traffic stop taught me that true strength comes from being able to acknowledge our biases and learn from them." Captain Thompson's role evolved too. What started as a tense traffic stop became the foundation for a groundbreaking training program. Police departments nationwide began requesting the comprehensive footage, from the initial stop to the community center resolution, to use as a case study in their sensitivity and bias training sessions. The captain's measured response, both as the subject of profiling and as a senior officer, provided a unique perspective that couldn't be replicated in traditional training scenarios. The young observer who had been part of the reform initiative became an unexpected bridge between law enforcement and the community. His documentation of events, combined with the official body camera footage, painted a complete picture of how confrontation could transform into cooperation. Community meetings began featuring both videos, sparking honest discussions about police-community relations that had previously seemed impossible. But perhaps the most significant change came 6 months later, when the department unveiled its new training protocols. The retired sergeant, who had witnessed the transformation firsthand, played a crucial role in developing guidelines that emphasized human connection over mechanical procedure. "What we saw that day," he explained during the protocol's introduction, "was proof that our best training happens when we're willing to learn from our mistakes and each other." Officer Richards and Captain Thompson's story became more than just a viral moment or a training video. Their experience sparked a movement within law enforcement circles, challenging departments to review their approaches to traffic stops and community engagement. The Reform Advocates Initiative, though unfolding differently than planned, achieved something even more valuable. It captured genuine transformation in real time. 1 year after the traffic stop, both officers stood together at a national law enforcement conference, sharing their story with colleagues from across the country. The dashcam footage played behind them as they described how a routine morning had become a catalyst for change. Their presentation ended with a simple but powerful message. Sometimes the best lessons come from our most uncomfortable moments. The community center where everything culminated became a regular meeting spot for police-community dialogue sessions. The young observer who had been there that day often facilitated these discussions, bringing together officers and residents to build understanding through honest conversation. The walls now displayed photos from that pivotal day, reminding everyone that change is possible when we're willing to face our biases head-on. As this story comes to a close, it's worth noting that real change doesn't happen in a single morning or through one incident alone. What made this story remarkable was how a potentially negative encounter transformed into an opportunity for growth, understanding, and systemic improvement. The traffic stop that could have been another statistic instead became a turning point, proving that progress often begins when we least expect it. Today, Officer Richards still patrols the same streets, but with a different perspective. Captain Thompson continues mentoring young officers, using his experience from both sides of the badge to build better understanding. And somewhere, right now, their story is being shared in another precinct, another training session, or another community meeting, reminding us all that change is possible, one traffic stop at a time. The dash cam footage that captured it all still exists, serving as a testament to what can happen when conflict meets compassion, when mistakes meet understanding, and when law enforcement and community come together to build a better future. Because in the end, the most powerful stories aren't about perfect people, but about real people willing to learn, grow, and change.